You start with $100. You don't start with a breakthrough, a bonus, or some unexpected financial miracle that changes your life overnight. You start with something so small it feels almost irrelevant, and that is exactly why it matters more than anything else. Because $100 is not about money at this stage. It is about identity, and whether you are someone who begins or someone who waits for the perfect moment that never comes. Most people never realize that wealth is not blocked by opportunity, but by hesitation repeated over time. You set up the transfer. You choose something simple like an index fund. Instead of chasing complexity you don't understand yet, you press confirm, and nothing in your life changes except a number on a screen that most people would ignore completely. There is no applause. There is no emotional shift that tells you your life is now different. There is only silence, and that silence is where most people quit without even noticing they made a decision to stop. The account shows $100. The market moves slightly up and slightly down, and your money follows it without drama. You check it more than you should because you are waiting for something meaningful to happen, but nothing meaningful arrives yet. This is where the real test begins. Not in knowledge or intelligence, but in patience for something that does not reward you immediately. Because everything in modern life trains you to expect instant feedback, and investing refuses to give it. You continue anyway. Another $100 goes in the next month, and then another, and slowly, what felt like a one-time decision becomes a pattern that no longer requires motivation to repeat. 6 months pass. The account grows, but not in a way that impresses anyone. It reaches a number that is technically positive but emotionally insignificant, and that is exactly the stage where most people mentally disconnect. Because $500 or $600 does not feel like progress when your expectations are shaped by social media and unrealistic success. Time flies, but what you don't see is that something far more important than money is being built. You are building consistency without reward. And that is a skill most people never develop in their entire lifetime, because they quit anything that does not immediately validate their effort. 1 year passes. You have contributed $1,200. The account shows a small gain beyond that, but not enough to change your lifestyle or even your financial stress in a visible way. But something internal has changed without your awareness. You no longer panic about the process. You no longer expect instant transformation. You simply continue, and continuation itself becomes the reward. This is the first invisible shift. You stop treating money as something emotional and start treating it as something structural. And that shift alone separates people who build wealth from people who chase it. Because chasing requires excitement, building requires repetition, and repetition is boring by design, which is why almost nobody stays long enough to see what it becomes. At this stage, you also discover something unexpected. Your life did not collapse because you invested $100 every month. Nothing important broke. Nothing essential disappeared. The things you thought you needed that $100 for were mostly emotional assumptions, not actual necessities. And once that realization settles in, your relationship with money begins to change quietly. You begin to understand that most financial fear is not based on reality, but on uncertainty. And once you prove to yourself that small consistency does not destroy your life, the fear starts losing its control over you. Year 2 arrives. The account has grown slightly more, not dramatically, but consistently. And consistency is now something you trust more than hope or motivation. You start checking the account differently. You're not to check if something went wrong, but to observe how time is shaping your decisions. The psychology shifts from fear to curiosity. And curiosity is dangerous in a good way because it keeps you engaged without pressure. You are no longer trying to escape discomfort. You are watching a process unfold. Then the market drops. Not slightly, but enough to make the numbers uncomfortable. You see your balance decrease and feel a brief moment of doubt appear without invitation. This is the second real test. Not starting the habit, but continuing it when the outcome temporarily looks worse than before. Because anyone can invest when things are rising, but very few can continue when the illusion of progress disappears temporarily. You don't stop. You don't pause contributions. You continue the $100 as if nothing external has changed your internal system. And this decision matters more than the money itself, because you are now proving something far more valuable than returns. You are proving emotional stability under uncertainty. Months pass. The market recovers slowly, and your account follows it back upward. But something deeper is now permanent inside your thinking. You understand that drops are not failure. They are part of the structure. And reacting emotionally to them only disrupts the long-term outcome you are building. By year 3, your balance has grown further. It is still not impressive to anyone else, but it is no longer invisible to you. You can see direction now, not just numbers. And direction changes everything, because it confirms that the system is working even when progress feels slow. That confirmation removes the need for emotional validation. You stop expecting excitement. You stop expecting acceleration. You stop expecting external recognition. You simply trust the process because it has already proven itself in small ways. At this stage, something subtle happens. Your attention starts shifting from earning money actively to understanding how money behaves when left alone long enough. You begin reading differently. You no longer look for shortcuts or hype. You start looking for principles that remain stable across decades, not trends that disappear in months. And that change in curiosity leads to better decisions without forcing them. Because understanding replaces impulse, and understanding is what protects long-term capital. By year 4 and 5, the habit is no longer a habit. It is part of your financial identity. You don't debate it anymore. You don't question it anymore. It simply happens, like brushing your teeth or waking up in the morning. And when a habit reaches that stage, it becomes permanent, without effort. Your account is now large enough to feel real. Not life-changing, but real enough to matter. It has crossed from symbolic to functional, and now you start seeing something new. Growth begins to contribute meaningfully, not equally, but noticeably. The money you invested years ago starts working alongside you. This is the beginning of compounding awareness. The moment you realize that your past decisions are now participating in your present outcome. And that realization is the point where most people either accelerate or regret, because they finally understand what happens when time is allowed to participate in financial growth. By year 7 or 8, something changes again. The account no longer feels like something you built alone. It feels like something that is partially building itself. Returns start to contribute in ways that your monthly contribution cannot match anymore. And this creates a psychological shift in how you view effort. You stop thinking only in terms of income earned through time. You start thinking in terms of systems that produce outcomes without continuous input. That shift is subtle but permanent. Because once you see money behaving independently, you cannot unsee it or return to old thinking. By year 10, the original $100 decision no longer feels small. It feels foundational, because everything you have built rests on that repetition. And now the irony becomes clear. The amount that once felt too small to matter was actually the only amount that could start the process without resistance. Because large amounts require confidence. Small amounts require only consistency. And consistency is the real engine behind everything that compounds. At this point, You understand something most people never reach. Wealth is not built by dramatic moves. It is built by unnoticeable decisions repeated over long periods. And the longer you continue, the less effort it feels like, and the more identity it becomes. You are no longer trying to invest. You are someone who invests. That identity is what carries everything forward. Not market timing, not luck, not income spikes, but behavior that no longer needs motivation to continue. And eventually, the numbers grow beyond what you originally imagined. Not because the system changed, but because you didn't. The same $100 decision repeated long enough becomes something entirely different from what it started as. Not because it was big, but because it was never interrupted. And that is the final truth most people miss. It was never about the $100. It was about whether you would stay long enough for $100 to become something else entirely. Because in the beginning, it looks like nothing. But in the end, it becomes everything.